Okay, so I thought it might be quite useful to show you this old HHSRS example, which has come from the original 2004 worked examples. So this is a worked example for excess cold. And so the hazard is excess cold. Property is being having such cool indoor living temperatures, either due to lack of insulation or inadequate heating, or both. It starts to threaten the health of the occupiers of the property. So the vulnerable group for this is persons aged 60 years or over. So what we're saying here is that the people that are most likely to be affected, and they always define the vulnerable group by age, mostly due to the fact that that's the way the evidence is. It's a nice clean thing that line you can draw in the evidence. So they're saying that anybody that's aged 60 years or over has a greater risk of health from excess cold than the rest of the population. And the whole idea of that is that if you inspect the house based on this, and you assume that the at-risk group is living at the property when you inspect it, rather than the actual occupiers, and you inspect it based on the at-risk group living at the property, the vulnerable group, then you can be sure that the property, if rested for them, as safe, is going to be safe for everybody else. So then we've got the related hazards. So this is damp and mold growth. So we're saying that if you've got damp in the property, well, that's going to reduce the insulative ability of the structure of the property. If it's full of water in, then you're not going to have those little pockets of air which are insulating the property. So if you've got a cold, damp property, then that's much worse than just having a cold property. So we've got a couple of typical pictures which are demonstrating the sort of property we're looking at, and this is a BISF, British Iron and Steel Federation house. And so after the Second World War, they built thousands of these, and they are made out of precast panels of steel or aluminium that were produced in a factory. Mostly it's a steel, and there's two thin layers of corrugated steel with a sheet of rock wool in between. So not very well insulated, very cold in winter, very hot in summer. The heating was originally by open fires throughout, so we've got a short description of the deficiencies in the property. At some time, the open fireplaces to the first floor were sealed and gas fires were fitted in the two ground floor living rooms. The occupier uses portable electric heaters to supplement the gas fires. So that's the heating provision. You can't think about heating without thinking about insulation. So the insulation, the original construction, included glass wool, rock wool quilting hung within the external wall frame, so between those two layers of corrugated steel, and a thin 50mm layer to the whole of the roof space. There's no insulation to the hot water tank, and the windows are single glazed. So there's a list of relevant matters that affect the likelihood and harm outcome. And what it does here is it scores them 1 to 3 for each. So for thermal insulation, it's saying the level of insulation is seriously defective. It is very little insulation. For dampness, there's no relevant damp in the property. Settling of insulation, because it's old insulation, it's going to have settled quite a lot. So that's going to be a 3 again, seriously defective. The type of heating provision, well, we've got those gas fires and we've got convector heaters. So we do have a reasonable provision for heating within the property. So we can say that that is, but it's not particularly efficient, and it's the portable portable electric fires. So we can say that it's only moderately defective, so it gets a 2, and so on through these different options here. Then we've got to determine the likelihood. Now this is the likelihood that harm will occur over the next 12 months. So excess cold is something that is a physiological issue. It causes problems with your physiology, and so we have to consider not just what it would be like if we visited this property in the summer, but also what it's going to be like over an entire year and some of those chronic health conditions which will start to develop. And so you see here that they've given it a score of 1 in 32. So that there'll be some form of ill health as a result of the cold in this property over the next 12 months. So if we're looking at it over a whole year, we're saying that there's a 1 in 32 chance. So if you're going to, so it works very much the same way as you would see bets done at a bookies, at a branch of a sports bookies. So any gambling arrangement, a 1 in 32 probability. And it also tells us here that the average property in the UK is 1 in 400 chance of there being some kind of ill health occurring in that property over a given 12-month period, which is actually remarkably high when you think about the fact that we've got something like 20.5 million properties in the UK that are residential. So the justification is related to these deficiencies. And so they've said that the 2 gas fires are not capable of heating the whole dwelling. The insulation, even as original, would be considered inadequate now and has settled over the years to become less effective. The result is that the likelihood of the dwelling being unhealthily cold is increased. And so you can see here they've increased it from a 1 in 400 chance to a 1 in 32 chance of ill health occurring over the next year. So the next question. So we park it now about how likely it is that ill health is going to occur. Let's consider how bad it'll be when it occurs. So if we're considering how severe the outcomes are going to be when that ill health occurs, then we have, in this worked example, we haven't deviated from the national averages, which are 34, 6, 18 and 42. So the class of harm outcomes, class 1, is very severe health issues occurring, so it's death, permanent paralysis, that sort of thing. So they're saying that when a health harm outcome occurs, then 34, on average 34% of the time, it's that sort of level of health impact. They're saying that 6% of the time, it's slightly less severe, but still pretty severe. As we go down to class 2s, class 3s are less severe again, so we're saying 18% of the time it's going to be something that will take you out of work. It'll be something that you'll be in bed for a little while with, but it's something that you'll probably recover from. And then class 4 health outcomes are the much more moderate ones that you could might cause a few days off work, or likely to be some kind of low-level issues and discomfort. So you're saying 42% of the time you're going to suffer from those issues. So if harm does occur. So you can see here that actually the spread of harm that you get if you were to average out all of the ill health that occurs from excess cold across the entire 20.5 million UK houses is, on average, is pretty severe. A third of the time you're looking at death or very close to death. So it's a very serious issue indeed, excess cold in houses. So the justification, if we notice, we've left it at the same as the national averages for an average property in the UK. They've said, although the likelihood of harmful occurrence is much higher than average, there's nothing to indicate that the spread of harms will vary from the average. So what they're saying is the likelihood of some kind of ill health occurring has gone up, but the severity of that ill health is going to be just the same as an average property in the UK. So these figures are then put into a formula, which we'll go on to look at, and that says that we have, by increasing the likelihood, we've increased the score to an A, the score of 10,233. Average property in the UK is 880. So what we're saying here is that the property in question is 1, 2, 3 hazard bandings worse than an average property in the UK. Okay, don't worry too much about this rating scores after improvements. That's just suggesting some remedial action that can be undertaken. I just want you to have a look through one of these for me to talk you through it so you understand what it looks like when it's finished. Now we'll go back a few steps to consider it from the start again.